Hello, 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 and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I'm a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too because you're watching content like this. The name of this channel is Holistic Manifesting because I believe in a whole body, whole person, whole mind, whole being experience when it comes to manifesting the life you choose in anything that you're trying to manifest, right? You can't half-heartedly go at anything if you want to get the full results. That's just the way life works, right? So what I'm discussing today is actually a couple of things, but the overarching concept is how important it is for us to know our personal truths, right? So I've been in the process of reading this book. It's like it's from a person. On YouTube. It's called A Singular Truth. His name is Soul Immortal, but he wrote this book, and I'm always buying books from people on YouTube, and every now and then there's a really good gem, and this is one because I don't mince words when it comes to people's writing in books because that's something that's important to me. And in a book, it's talking about a singular truth in an understanding of what do you actually see for yourself? What do you actually believe for yourself, right? It's just another perspective on thinking about what is it that you are trying to create, and are you in a position, or are you in the belief system, or are you in the mindset to actually bring that thing about, right? And in a video where he was explaining a little bit more about the actual book, he was talking about there's a ceiling and a floor when it comes to your truths, right? And there's like an area that you're not going to go past because it's not a part of your truth. And there's also a ceiling that you're not going to grow past because of your truths, right? And I was sitting there thinking, like, I've never rationalized this in that way before. And I was like, when I was like down on my luck, we'll say that, a few years ago, and like I didn't have any work, any contracts, I had nothing, like everything just dried up. And I'm like, what is happening? And I felt like all was going to be lost, right? I was ready to give up my vehicle, give up my home. I was like thinking about what I'm going to do now, because I don't like that stuff to control me. So I just was like, if it doesn't work out, things don't shape up, then okay. But this is the thing. When I was listening to that conversation about having a truth and having a ceiling and a floor to it, I realized that I was never going to be homeless in that instance. And the biggest reason was because that was not a truth for me. Like in my mind, it was never remotely a reality in the world, in what we call the 3D world. It was a reality. And sometimes I think, well, girl, don't be delusional. You know what? This might happen. But that's all it was. It was never like, oh my God, this is happening and it's all going to fall apart. Like my personal truth never let me believe that I was going to be homeless or things weren't going to work out, right? And then it's also like I was thinking about being in a connection with people and being in relationships and friendships and all that. And when you create boundaries and someone might step outside of a boundary that you have, and you're just like, I always think that I do what they call it Monday morning quarterbacking. I always think back to like, what could I have done differently? How did that thing, why are we not friends today? And like all that sort of stuff. And generally, it boils down to something that I value as one of my truths, and it having a ceiling and a floor, right? And whatever was happening in that connection, that friendship, that relationship, or whatever that was, it was beyond what I was willing to see as my personal truth. And this is to say that that's not to say that these things are bad that other people are doing, or somehow because it's not my truth, it's a bad truth. That's just not the truth. But it's just a more clear perspective on what do you actually believe clearly about your experience here in this life, right? I was telling someone the other day, might have been one of my daughters, because, they talk like grown people now, but, I didn't raise no babies, so they kind of got, one of them is fake shallow, and she's like, I'm really deep, but I don't want to do that conversation in public, so I'm like, fake shallow, I know it. The other one is so deep, she's aloof. I just love it, right? It's so fun to see how these little people grow up and what they become, right? Well, I was having a conversation with her the other day, and I was saying how I never had a poor or poverty mentality. Never did. There were times in my life where I was really not good with money. And it wasn't because I didn't have the potential to be good with money. It's just because I was just like using my money in the same way that was traditionally it was used around me, right? So like overspending on knickknacks, going to these little dollar stores, all these little things. And it's like, that was my lifestyle because I was raised in an environment that on the weekends, you went out with the women or the friends or whoever, and you went and shopped and bought nonsense, right? So that was kind of one of the only times. But even in those moments, I never ever felt like I was spending my last, because I hear people say that sometime, and I'm just like, I always feel like there's too much abundance in the world for me to truly think. I wish I had water. I feel like my throat got dry. Let me swallow. Anyway, I was like, there's too much abundance for me to truly believe that. I remember being in a store shopping with somebody, and she was a very frugal type of person, right? And my daughters were very little. And I remember being like, I wasn't low on funds, but I had just enough, right? And I was just in the store with her, and there were these diapers to buy, and it was on an end cap, and they were called Dots, right? You haven't heard of it because, what diapers are called Dots. I was like, I'm looking for Huggies or Pampers, the ones that have the leak control. Not the ones that when they pee, the smiley faces show up. I'm like, those things, I'm going to be changing them 5-10 times a day. And I kind of knew this. And then she was going on and on. You're going to be wishing you had that $10 extra next week. And I was like, no, I won't. There'll be another $10 that'll come. So it's like my truth in that area has never been scarce. It's never been, I don't have enough. So sometimes when I come in environments, I have a hard time being empathetic when someone has that belief system that's lower than my floor when it comes to finances, right? Because there's a part of me that always feels like there's always a way to generate some income. There's always something to be done. There's always, you got these degrees, you got these skill sets, you got the talents. It's like my mindset, it's always like, no. And then even sitting still, waiting, I've had people bring me money for things that I needed at different times. So I'm saying all that to say that the reason why I've never been down on myself in the dumps about money or finances is because my truth about that is that I'm never broke, right? My truth about it is that I'm an abundant person. And like one of my good friends said, who's, she's a mentor turned professor turned old supervisor. Now I call her a friend. And she says, she doesn't even think about her bank account in that sense of, oh, what do I have? She's like, in her mind, she's like, the money is always there. She's like, the minute she start rationalizing why she shouldn't or what's about whatever something she's trying to create or do or have or be. And if you're not a waster, then you're spending your money correctly. And she says that I just think like the money's always there. And I don't have time to fiddle with that. And I'm like, man. And when I heard her say that, I've been in that mindset ever since. And let me tell you, it's like you're creating the environment that you are living in. And we know that's what we're trying to do. But I don't think people really understand all the times how literal it is and how you got your hands in the clay. And when you're sitting there and you're deciding, like you're really, doing introspection and you got your notepad and you're just like, well, what are the ceilings and the floors to my truths, And there's some other areas where I do have ceilings and floors, that are not working in my favor. And I'm like, you know what? You may need to work better for harder there. And with this one, you may need to move that floor a little bit higher up because you're not accomplishing the goal that you want, right? So that's kind of what I had to say in a message today. And I'm going to keep reading this book because I enjoyed it. It's really good. And I may do a review at the very end because I rarely read anything new that has information in it that doesn't feel like it's just regurgitated. And it feels like there's some type of an intellectual wisdom coming from behind it. And that, the person truly has lived and gets what they're talking about. You know what I mean? So anyway, so what are your personal truths? What are those things in your life that you are maybe struggling with that you may not have figured out? And think about, what do you really believe for yourself there, right? Because a lot of times we haven't really looked at our belief systems in such a granular way where we're breaking it down to think like, man. So and this is the last example I'll give you. Whenever I'm doing work for people, like contracts or doing projects or making things, like I do all kinds of stuff. And I have this feeling in me all the time that I am not doing something right. Like there's always this overwhelming feeling that I'm wrong. Like I'm picking the wrong design. I'm picking the wrong words. They're not going to like it. And it's not even about beating myself up. I'm still going forward. I'm still doing the work. I'm still pushing through. I'm still making it happen, right? But there's a part of me that's still sitting in there going, you know what, you may get in trouble. You have to, and what trouble with who? Trouble with what, Maybe from childhood thinking about trouble. But I mean, like, I had to really think about that deeply and think, man, in my head, for me to feel that way, I truly am not fully seeing my value as a person who does this type of work if I think that the people who are receiving it are going to nitpick me and treat me that way, because they never do. Never ever do. And they're not going to receive it, and they're not going to be positive and uplifting with it. And, just if there's feedback, shared in the most respectful way. That's always happened. But for me, that truth in me says that, but what if? And so I'm noticing that. And I'm just like, man, my new truth has got to be, I do amazing work. I have a really cute flair to things that I create, right? I'm very technically inclined with also a design eye, right? So I'm using the left and the right side of my brain constantly. I develop projects and ideas and concepts that people can use, and they're always happy to wait on me to come up with the best solution, right? That is the new truth that I should have in that area, that I'm working on in that area, because always thinking like that, it creates anxiety and it just really cuts into your creativity. But if I have in my mind that I'm worth the wait, that I'm worth the patience, that I'm worth people taking time and truly evaluating every aspect of what I'm creating and what I'm developing and what I'm sharing, then I don't have to sit and question it while I'm doing things, right? Kind of like I can focus on being persistent as opposed to focusing on the doubt in things, right? So just think about that. What are your personal truths and areas? And I know a big one that a lot of people probably don't want to touch, and we already know money, but relationships. Like, what are your personal truths? What's your ceiling and what's your floor when it comes to certain behaviors? A lot of times we don't really go through that. We just kind of like, I met someone, it was nice, let's go with the flow. And then we find ourselves mismatched with people who have very different values from us, different mindsets, different ways of living, so much stuff, because we were not really focused on what are my truths in that area. Because eventually it's all gonna come out. It's all gonna show up. It's all gonna just, there's nothing that's going to be hidden. Your truths and your values eventually are going to push through, and you'll have the opportunity to either shift and change them if you feel like they are not working for you, or you have the opportunity to go all in because you're like, hey man, I don't care if I lose people. This is my truth. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.